Hello and welcome to the child-free zone. If you're a kid, you log on off. You go climb a tree or something. Do something wholesome and productive.
Shouldn't you be striking for the climate right now?
Yeah.
Get to it. We're relying on you. Hi, welcome to our new video.
Where we're going to be talking about our decision at the moment.
Right, meow. We stand by nothing ever.
To be without children in this exact moment.
To be childless, barren, bereft of joy and meaning in this world. We're going to get into why that appeals to us so much. If you're new here, hi, welcome, I'm Sam.
And I'm Tanner.
If you didn't see our video last week, by the way, and you're ex-Mormon, we read the first chapter of Tennis Shoes Among the Nephites, and it was great, so you should go watch that video. And we're also going to be reading another chapter of it after this on our Patreon. So join us on Patreon if you want to follow that series with us.
Cool.
It's going to be a good time. No more housekeeping, I don't think. We do have as off on the shelf candle burning. It's banana, nut bread, and coconut, and every candle sold plants a tree, so that's just an option you have. And let's get into it.
So, Samantha, what made you decide to want to forfeit your blessings of eternal progeny?
I was hoping we'd start with you, just because you've had a vasectomy. So I feel like you've done more. Well, I guess a vasectomy is reversible, but I feel like that feels to me like quite a final move.
Yeah.
So can we start with you?
All right. Well, I did see the YouTube algorithm recommended today a video of some person, I don't know whether it was a politician or a doctor but was recommending mandatory vaccines for men until...
Vasectomies,
did I say vaccines?
Yeah.
The other V word. And I don't like the idea of forcibly vasectomizing anybody, but voluntarily has been pretty nice. Our critics online are like, and you want people to give up the most basic joy of biological life, which is to have and raise children. I'm like, I'm not telling people to do shit. People can do whatever they want. I fully recognize that there are people who are equipped, able, ready, willing to have children, and I think that's awesome.
And some who simply just want them.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't really have to make a disclaimer, but this isn't a video of us saying that we think there's a morally superior choice. We are just talking about our feelings about this. So if you have children or want to have children, we're on your team. We love kids, and so just don't project anything onto us, okay? We're on your team.
Now, for me personally, I was like, I love this expression, wrench from the ether an individual consciousness and entrap it in this, a tiny meat suit made of my DNA and force it to grow up under my tutelage. And I want to make sure I'm ready to do that, and that I have the wherewithal, that I'm taking care of myself properly. I have the oxygen mask on myself before I go tending to a tiny little me and make sure that I'm in a relationship that can sustain that I have the finances and the ability to take care of a life without making it a matter of so much stress that they inherit that and it becomes part of their problem reckoning and dealing with reality. It sounds like a lot, and for me right now, I am certainly not ready to do that. Now, I've dated different people who have been on birth control or this or that, and I got to a point where I was like, I can be responsible for me, and if I want to make sure that a person is not being born into this world willy-nilly, then I can just take some personal responsibility and snip, spend 10 minutes breathing on nitrous oxide while a doctor cuts into me, and there was sparks and going on, and I was like, whoa! And my friends were there supporting me and recorded the whole thing. The doctor was cool with it.
You don't feel anything, right? It's not painful.
I mean, you can one pressure, and there was one point where I was like, whoa! But then it was just
easier than a root canal.
Easier than a root canal, yeah. At least it's not in your face. It feels somehow less invasive.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Can I just say, imagining being a man, something that would scare the shit out of me is getting someone pregnant and then them having different thoughts on abortion to me, and then deciding to have and suddenly I'm a dad, and then you have to decide whether to be an absent father because you didn't sign up for any of that, and maybe you believed they were on birth control. Sometimes I guess it's possible that you could be misled, or like, but also birth control can fail, all those things. Like, that just seems so terrifying to me. And I think, I don't know, it's just, my mum worked for the child support agency my whole life, so she would go after like dads that didn't pay child support and all that. And, you know, obviously very in favor of dads paying child support, but it is also very like scary to imagine that a child can come into the world against your will. And I know some people will say like, oh, you shouldn't have had sex then, but it's like, sex is a normal part of life and birth control can fail. And yeah, it's just a very scary prospect, imagining that like fatherhood could be thrust upon you.
And I think for a lot of people, that's the exact situation under, or like very similar circumstances under which they became parents, was like, ooh, I was not fully ready for this, which is why a lot of them try to pass on the discomfort of the whole experience by being like, you're never ready, you always just gotta rush into it. And
it's
like,
totally
you
normal to do it
don't.
when you don't really want to and you're not equipped. Yeah, sorry, my heater's on, it will go off soon.
Okay, yeah.
And then it's also seen as like so morally repulsive if a man like advocates for an abortion, but I think that's like a real grey area that, like, if that was me, I'd want to advocate for an abortion because I wouldn't want to be a father.
Yeah, I know people who
That's on me imagining what
in
life would be like as a man.
Wow, practicing empathy for men? I don't know.
We do it all on this channel. So you decided to have a vasectomy because you already knew you didn't want children? Was that a big part of it?
Yeah, I just am a person who's like I'm very sensitive and like loud noises and smells and people jumping on, like I just like I feel like I love kids, like I love a great like 10 minutes playing a game with a kid.
I feel like me and you, that we are both really good with kids, because like when we are with kids, like when you hang out with a kid for like an hour or two, we are like all in, we are there with them, we are like, I think there is such an advantage to having people in society that don't have kids that can bring like a fresh energy to kids that like understandably their parents like don't have after like years of like toiling away at having to like discipline them and, you know, set boundaries, all that stuff. You know, it is nice to have just people that can bring that level of energy to kids. Yeah,
that's a point that Alok makes, which I really like, is that like if we really do believe that it takes a village to raise a child, and it does, like life making then becomes more than just procreating. It's also about the conditions under which the village is raising a child. Yes. And it does take a lot of energies, and people who have the like, who aren't who aren't carrying that same responsibility, who can lend in, and not to say that parents can't do that for each other, but like, why not just
like we live in a world that is like puts so much pressure on just a couple to raise children. Like that's one of the reasons I'm not drawn to it as a lifelong project, is because it, you know, you hope that you'll have community help, but we do live in a society where it's like on the couple to raise the child, and that's a lot.
I know so many people who like, they're like, my 20-year plan is to settle down with 7 lesbians and raise 1 child. Yeah, I'd be totally down for kind of a 7-person situation. Yeah.
I think there's often this idea that people that choose to not have children are like robbing themselves of life in some way, or like the human experience. But I really don't see it that way. First of all, like energy can't be created or destroyed, and it's like you can choose to put your life force into having and raising children, or you can choose to put it into something else. Either way, you have the same amount, and you know what I mean, you'll have the same amount of experiences, and it's just like different flavors, you know.
Nietzsche talks about that, like realizing like, okay, there's a natural disposition to recreate oneself and to be in the creative process. And he talked about sublimating that, and the easiest way to do that is through art and music and like creative endeavors.
Yeah, because obvious point, but the desire to have children is like wired into us evolutionarily for good reason, but we no longer like need it per se. You know, we've got a lot of people on the planet, and there's also a lot of children already that have been born that don't have parents. So at this point, I think it's perfectly reasonable to to not give in to that evolutionary impulse. Not that I have like really like felt that pull. But But yeah, like I feel like there's many evolutionary impulses that we don't give into, you know? It's not like you don't have to, oh, Jack. My child, Jack.
For me, like, I definitely feel, you know, an impulse toward sex, toward intimacy, and like that intimate relationshiping, and like occasionally I'll get like the idea of teaching a child something is like, oh, that would be so sweet and wholesome. But all the rest of it, I'm like, that would, the 2% of it would be sick, and the 98% I am not cut out for. Yeah. And I do, like, my creative process is so important to me, and what I just, like, love doing with my one wild and precious life. And that's not to say that couldn't change in the future, but as of now, like, I am fully content. And if I was, like, dying today, I wouldn't be like, oh, I wish I had a kid. I'd just be like, well, we're in no danger of running out of people on this planet. We just keep multiplying by the billions.
I do think, you know, you talk about how you're not cut out for it, and, like, I think what ultimately makes you not cut out for it is that you do not want to have a child.
Right.
But you would be.
Right.
You have done the kind of self-work. I would hope that, like, most, like, parents would try. Like, I do think you'd be an amazing father if that was something you wanted. But, yeah, I can't grasp this logic of, you know, sort of like the conservative talking head saying that it's selfish to not have children when we got lots of people around. And why on earth would it be selfish to choose not to do something you don't want to do when it's as precious and sacred as bringing a new human into this world? Like, there are so many people, so many of our problems in the world are because people weren't parented properly. Like, they didn't have parents that were able to, like, love them and hold them the way they needed to be. Who
did resent the experience of being a parent,
because
or who was so stressed out by it.
Yeah. I actually was interested before we started filming to know, because it seems generally people don't regret having kids, because obviously once you have a child, you're going to love that child so much. Not that that necessarily means you are cut out to actually like love that child as a verb, because I do think that's a different thing. But, you know, we are like all wired to feel great fondness for our young. So I looked it up, and apparently somewhere between like 5 and 15% of people say they regret having kids. So it's pretty low, but also high for what it is.
That's more than regret having a gender transition surgery.
Damn. Do you know what that statistic is?
It's like 1%.
Is it?
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah. Interesting.
More people regret corrective surgery, like a corrective back surgery. More people regret that than regret a gender,
No, that is really interesting.
Just, you know, context for statistics. My convenient sample, I have heard more parents express regret at having kids than I've heard parentless people express not having kids.
Yeah.
Every parentless person I have met has told me, so good, don't ever do it.
Yeah.
and then a lot of people are like, having a parent is the greatest joy ever. Some people are like, you have to or else. And I'm like, don't project on me. Yeah. And then other people are like, it's great if you feel the call. If not, no. Like,
yeah, it's a mixed bag. I feel like parents are generally either like, you should definitely do it. You should like definitely be in this camp with us, and they try and convince you that you definitely need to have kids. Or like I've heard both. The other side is parents being like, don't have kids, don't do it. I love my kids, wouldn't change them for the world, but don't do it.
Yeah. My background is like big Mormon family, and where people are encouraged at a very young age to start having kids, and that's kind of like a woman's whole identity. And it's largely, I think, from drawing from these frontier 1800s ideologies that are like, we gotta pop out kids because we actually could all starve to death this winter. Yeah. And it's like, we're actually not so much in danger of that. And in fact, our propensity to be like, more people to consume more and more and more and more is actually what's endangering the possibility of more people surviving. You know what I mean? Yeah,
so again, like, it's nothing about this video is us wanting to pass any judgment on anyone else's decision. But it is a valid point that the more, especially in the Western world specifically, the more kids that come into the world, the more like there's resource depletion, and the more people and kids in poorer countries that are impacted by climate change and resource depletion first and worst are going to suffer. So that is just something like worth thinking about. Esther Perel I think this was on the Diary of a CEO interview she did recently, said that when people have less food available to them, or like when people have less, they have more kids, because kids become a symbol of abundance where there is scarcity. And then in, populations where we are very abundant, people have less kids. And obviously like a big, that's multifactorial. There's like access to family planning now in ways that didn't used to be. But I did think that was an interesting, like it seemed true to me. I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it. And yeah, thinking about sort of the Mormon pioneer families. Mm-hmm. Again, probably didn't have great birth control, but...
Like my quiver full of, the Mormon pioneers were like, of 60 kids. Yeah. Not all of them, obviously. But.
Though, to be fair, quite a lot of community child raising in Mormon polygamy, though, when you watch like the FLDS documentary, you're like, that's not a good thing. It's like really fucked up.
No. And to a degree, the LDS approach is kind of like that, where you have these like somewhat superficial in my perspective compared to the relationships that I have now, because they're just based on maintaining this common belief structure as opposed to like expressing and exploring and celebrating each person's individuality and uniqueness. So in that way it felt more superficial to me, but you like meet up really often, and it's nice that the church has scaled back at least 1 hour from how often in a week alone members are expected to congregate together, and they're passing off their kids one to another. Mm-hmm. And there's something that's kind of nice about that, getting like, different people and different experiences to draw from. Also, of course, opens up more possibilities of abuse, where you like don't really know these people well. The only reason that you're in shared company is not through shared personal affinity, but just like a shared belief and shared geographical region. And they're not doing background checks except in areas where they've been forced to by law.
You have just made something click in my brain that is a bit scary, because I think we can all agree that a lot of Mormon women have absolutely been like pressured to have way more children than they would have naturally wanted. Mm-hmm. Again, as much as people always love the children that they have, like Jared's mum has 9 kids. Obviously she won't change that for the world, right. But it's like Mormon women haven't been able to make choices really fully about how many kids they want. But I was just thinking, like, if you have a ton of kids, you almost can't afford to be as scrupulous about who you hand them off to, because you probably are just like so desperate for a break. Mm-hmm. Whereas like, the sort of secular people that have like one well-behaved child, they'll be like so discerning, and they wouldn't, that kind of like cotton wool style parenting as people might think of it. It's just like a totally different style. I feel like a lot of big Mormon families, it's just kind of like, dig around off and do whatever you want. And there's sort of pros and cons to that too. But it's interesting to think about. So how old are you now?
I'm 33.
And you got your vasectomy at
34.
You're 33.
Yeah.
Time traveling vasectomist. Time traveling vasectomist. 31, 33, 32.
Don't ask me to do math on our channel. That's in my contract. I can't add or subtract 1 year. 32.
32.
Or 31. I will say, I have like a pretty common like dull ache down there, so it's not without its side effect.
Since the vasectomy? Mm-hmm. What common like constant since then?
Not constant, like not right now, but fairly like pretty frequently, really? Like a 1 to 2 pain, and then occasionally it'll like flare up to a 3. So not the worst thing in the world, but it is there, like a pain that wasn't there prior. And then, but every AFAB person is like, oh yeah, now you know a little bit of what it's like to have experienced feminine birth control, because I know a lot of people experience a lot of discomfort and really sharp pain often, and that's just expected, especially in straight culture, to just be like, well, yeah, that's the woman's job, is to be permanently discomfortable.
Yeah, because I have the Nexplanon on, and I will get like a 3 to 4 pain that sometimes where I can just like feel it in my arm, especially if I'm sick, like if I have a fever or something. Yeah, good point. Going back a little bit, but like you were saying, like certain parts of being a parent sound like really awesome to you, but just like on the whole, the entire project doesn't appeal to you for you. That's just exactly how I feel. Like if I spend an afternoon babysitting a friend's kid, which I love doing, I'll have the best time for the first hour, kind of start waning by the second, And then by the third, I'm like, how do parents do this 24 hours a day? And I know obviously you adjust. And I felt the same way when I looked after my neighbor's puppy once. I'm like, how do people have dogs?
I feel the same way about dogs. I'm like, how does any human being have a dog? But that's just me, who is like very sensitive. And every time a dog barks, I'm like, my whole body is like, ah! So like a loud child screaming, I'm like, ugh.
And I do think for some people, the thought of full-time responsibility like that is more appealing to them. Like maybe it like sort of even anchors them in a way that they feel they need. So I'm not, I'm constantly like, how are parents doing it? Like every time I've loved the sort of wave recently of women being more honest about their experiences with motherhood. Because, I mean, especially in Mormonism, we saw like such a glamorized version of it for so long. And we just, it was just only the highlights because women were not supposed to complain about being mothers. And now that women are being more honest, I'm like, well, that can only be a good thing for endless reasons. But it just blows my mind. Like, one single morning of being a parent, I'm just like, would knock me out for a week. I don't feel cut out for it. And I know people say like kids teach you patience, but I'm like, I'd rather learn patience in an easier, different way. And I'm even happy to develop less patience.
Let's say I'm not in a hurry to learn patience. And isn't that the most patient lesson of all?
And in some ways. I feel like there's so many things you can do in this. Like, there's so many aspects of many things in life that appeal to me, but I don't want the whole thing. Like, the thought of being a pop star in many ways sounds very appealing, but then when I think about, like, the sort of day-to-day of that, I'm like, I guess that doesn't really appeal to me overall. It's just, like, I like the idea of certain aspects of it.
Yes. So then you're like, okay, well, what aspect of that? How could I apply that aspect? This is me driving here today being like, oh, I just want to design buildings. How could I get a degree in architecture? And then I'm like,
math
do I really want to? Yeah, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it's good that the tides are turning to where I just think for so long it was just viewed as the default to have children. And if you were someone that said you didn't want children, you were viewed as weird or there was something wrong with you. And I just think that's an absurd approach given, again, like how sacred it is to bring another life into this world. So I'm happy to see like that shifting around.
Yeah, it's funny, like, again, coming from a Mormon background where there's like the whole tone is like, and culture is very coercive, pushy, and like about all of this. And I realized that not all parents and people who want to be parents or down with parenting are from that background, and we'll share that. Again, I feel like I have to clarify everything because I guess we get people who like literally come at us about this topic who are like, you just want people to live wild, hedonistic lives. I'm like, I don't want people to do jack shit. I'm just telling you how I feel. And the thing is, and also, if you think I'm teaching people bad things, then aren't you glad that I personally am not reproducing? Shouldn't you be thrilled about that prospect that I am not becoming a parent and teaching a kid to do bad things?
The irony of people telling other people who they think are evil for their views and ways of being that they're selfish for not having kids. I'm like, then that just shows that you don't truly love kids and it isn't about kids for you. It's about you wanting someone else to not have freedom. Like, you don't think
it betrays a great insecurity about other people's freedom.
And I think especially for sexist men, it is very enraging to them, the thought that a woman could choose to do what she wants. And it's like, I just read a really good book about this like question of like women choosing whether or not to be mothers, called Motherhood, which I'll link in the description box. And it talked about how, you know, people sort of see a childless woman as almost like a threat because it's like, what's she going to do with herself? You know, she's just like this free floating thing who could strike at any moment.
She could be trying to make history for all we know, and they're never well behaved.
No woman should be making history.
It's the same crowd that's like, everyone needs to have kids, even if I think you're a fundamentally evil person.
You still don't deserve the freedom of being child-free.
They also are like, nothing is destroying this world like feminism. And it's like, oh, you're so scared your wife could leave you. Like, that's what I hear. Yes. You say that to me and I'm like, oh, you're terrified of your wife having the thought of, like, living her authenticity or discovering a life outside of this. Like,
if women start having standards about men and the patriarchal structure starts crumbling, there's nothing that would keep my wife with me because all I have is this arbitrary made-up power.
If women aren't just submissive and breedable, if I can't win her over with literal domination, how am I gonna fare out here? She's gonna run off with some dandy queer like this guy.
Girls do want dandy queer guys like this guy. A mindset I really resonate with is, like, mother is an archetype as much as it is, like, an actual role. And no, I don't say that to, like, diminish, like, the work that actual mothers are doing or to, like, put it on the same level. But... like, I do identify as a person with, like, motherly instincts, and that's why I enjoy spending time with children. But the thing I realized is, like, I can enjoy children without having to make my own and look after my own 24/7. Like, you can access that part of yourself without it being your full-time job. Just like how I can make music as and when I feel like it, but I don't have to, like, become a musician as my full-time thing.
Yeah, and that's still, like, and that, I love music because for me that's, like, a deeply, deeply personal and, like, sacred thing. It's, like, so individual to each person, a person's music. And it's just a great example.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't have to do that all the time to feel that aspect within you. And the mother archetype, if you're just, like, fully embodying it, it's definitely not the magician jester archetype, which I am. I juggle. Yeah. I don't have children.
Yeah. Just kind of trying to go through as many of the points I feel like people make about this as possible. Again, there's sort of, from some people, especially I feel like a lot of the time, like, patriarchal men, they really resent the thought of you having freedom and not having to, like, do the work of being a parent because maybe it's very frustrating for them and, you know, whatever. And there's kind of this idea of, like, the fact that they are sacrificing for a child, like, makes them more noble. But I sent you a quote from that book I was reading recently that basically just summed up the notion of, like, if you choose to bring a child into this world, like, you're signing up for that work. So it doesn't make you inherently, like, more or less noble, whether, you know what I mean? I do think we should really respect mothers, but it's also, like, I don't think it's, like, inherently, like, more respectable to choose to be a parent. No. So I don't think you are just, like, inherently owed respect in a way that other people aren't because you made the choice to do something that is notoriously a lot of work and very... you know, you have to make a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah. And again, so many women, at least from my biased, limited perspective and background, have felt like maybe if they had had all the information up front and were in such a pushy culture, they at least could have been more selective about how and when, you know, under what circumstances they decided to have children.
The when is huge because I've heard from so many women who have left Mormonism, or, you know, just Mormon women in general, that they wish they had waited longer. Because I think when you're in the church, you know, you're married, you're 22, 23, that's starting to feel like a really reasonable time to have children. But the culture I come from is like none of my friends from high school I'm 31, no one from my sort of group of friends growing up has had children yet. My mum had me at 36. Like, there's a big cultural difference there that can make people feel like they have to have children when I look back at myself at, like, you know, early 20s, I'm like, I was still in my girlhood. And I do think a lot of women almost, like, cut their girlhood short without even realizing it because you don't realize until it's gone what you're losing. And then you already have this child and it's, like, your responsibility to look after them forever. And I think that's really hard. And I think that is the thing that hasn't been talked about enough is, like, the grief of women being sort of coerced by culture into having children sooner than they realistically are ready for. Because you know, obviously there are parents who do an amazing job who have kids in their early 20s. Or even there are great parents that, like, had kids as teenagers. Like, it's not you know, it's also circumstantial. But in general, you learn a lot throughout your 20s. So for women, you know, 21, 22 to feel pressure to start having kids, I just think is insane. Like, because once you have them, they're there forever. You'll never be able to, like, get any time back of you not being a mother. So, you know, as much as I understand that there are health reasons that people will choose to have kids young, like you're more likely to have a safer pregnancy if you have kids sooner. And that's like something everyone has to sort of reckon with on their own. I still just think there shouldn't be any cultural pressure to be making that decision. So yeah.
Agreed. But the talking heads at Fox News are so scared that if we don't keep everybody breeding so young, then the Muslims will outpopulate us in 100 years. And what will a Muslim-run Earth look like?
Well, all the Christians will be gone, so it won't matter. I love Chelsea Handler and all the sort of, like, she is someone who has not had kids and does not, like, regret it at all. And she's very involved in her niece and nephew's lives. She talks about how, like, because she doesn't have kids, she's been able to, like, fund her niece and nephew's education.
That's awesome.
And, like, do all these things she wouldn't have been able to otherwise do. And, like, she's a creator, you know? She has, in my opinion, done, like, a lot of good for the world and put a lot of stuff out there that has benefited. And, yeah, just, like, the simple act of bringing a new human into the world, like, on its own is not, like, of merit. It's how you do it, you know? And, like, there are lots of people that have been brought into the world and it's been... I don't want to say a net negative because I don't think you can ever say that, but it's like, you know, people get traumatized by their upbringing and by having parents that weren't ready to be parents. And then there's a lot of ways that has knock-on effects in the world. There's so much that can be said about this.
So say on abortion, it is interesting that, like, statistically, it's not just people who use it as an excuse to never have children, but it's, like, actual mothers who can't afford... that child.
I didn't even know that
can't
until
support that child, whether that be financially, emotionally, physically.
Yeah, I think the majority of abortions are by women who have already had at least a child already. So this archetype, this narrative that everyone getting abortions is just like loose single women sleeping around, like that's not what the data shows.
Oh, it's so scary how patriarchal society really views women as like a utilitarian function of like, you are a life portal and that is it. Like that is your responsibility. That will always come first over you as a person, as a complete individual, out like with that being a singular aspect, not the primary focus. Like can't handle that.
Yeah, I watched season 1 of The Handmaid's Tale and it was one of the hardest watches of my entire life. I never even watched season 2 because I found it so hard to watch. Did you ever watch The Handmaid's Tale?
Do you think Tom Cruise has ever hunted a human for sport?
Yeah.
I think he might have.
Unquestioningly, yeah, I do think that. I know that a big reason people will give for why they had children or why they think everyone should sort of have children is the idea that, well, you might regret it down the line if you don't, which... to me feels like a bad reason to bring a new human into this, like on the off chance that I might regret it if I don't do that.
You might regret not getting deeply into your art or becoming a ventriloquist or travel, you know, spending your life traveling the world. Like you'll have regrets. No, that's the basis of existentialism. It's like, that was, what's his name? Kierkegaard. Do this and you'll regret it. Like, have kids, you'll regret it. Don't have kids, you'll regret it. Travel, you'll regret it. Don't travel, you'll regret it. There will always be pros and cons to everything. So it's literally just been like, you said, like, what flavor of experience do you want here? Like, what sounds best to you? Because there's going to be pros and cons to all of it.
Yeah, like, every choice you make is then, like, shutting down another choice, like, with everything. So, yeah, I think that is, like, quite absurd logic, and if we applied it to anything else, I mean, we wouldn't, you know, it's stupid. But I think the other argument I've heard a lot is that I heard a lot because even growing up, I was sort of horrified at the thought that I was sort of, and I grew up in England, so it's not like you had to have children, but it was very much still the culture of you're kind of weird if you don't end up having children. And if you say you don't want children as a kid, they're like, you'll change your mind. But I think a thing I heard a lot was like, well, who's going to look after you when you're older if you don't have children? And again, that feels like quite a bad reason to have children, you know, just to sort of become your caretaker one day. That's like kind of a selfish reason, really. And it also shows how lacking our society is in community care, that we're like, I better have children even if I don't like really want them, because otherwise I'll be completely alone when I'm older.
And maybe not having children allows you to pursue a vocation that might like follow along your more natural interests, which could be better on your whole system, less distressing for your just day-to-day living. It could also maybe allow you to make more income so that you can provide a better retirement for yourself and not
build
have
a
to rely
stronger
on
community.
Yeah.
Because there are ways that, especially in our society, that having children like shuts people off from their community in certain ways. And again, this is all like circumstantial, but I just think like the basic structure of how our society is right now, it's like when people have kids a lot of the time, like they don't really see their single friends as much anymore. You know, there is more of like a insulating themselves within the home to sort of
makes sense.
Which makes sense.
Seems like it take a ton of time and energy.
Yeah, I always like really admire parents that are able to do a lot of stuff with kids, because I just think I think it would be. I struggle to like, I don't know, leave the house now.
Yeah. Oh, I know when I see like good parents, and we have friends who have kids, and they're all like great parents, and we're like, damn, some people are better at this. And I'm just not cut out for it is what it comes down to. I don't have bad genes. I appreciate the genes that I've inherited. I don't want to curse my own existence. Yeah. But
it's an annoying shadow. It's really bothering.
Do we really got to pass it all on?
Do we really try to pass this on?
I do. I'm like, you know, something of a transhumanist, and I like a futurist, and I like to think of the fantastical things that could be available in the future. And there is like this like poetic appreciation and very just like biological appreciation for this continued lineage that like I literally am my parents. I am the part of them that continues. This DNA sequence has been stretching back for like, you know, however millions and millions and millions of years back to the first little protozoa and shit that multiplied and devoured each other and started reproducing. Like, that's a long chain, and there is like, again, that like poetic ideal of like, oh, it'd be cool to pass that forward. And who knows, maybe someday they can resurrect me, but I don't know about that. Mm-hmm. Like, we've talked about that before. I feel like if we could resurrect people right now at this moment, which we could basically do, we know how to clone things, right? Like, we know how to clone sheep.
Damn.
We could clone people probably, but we're not going to, because we see that as unethical, as like, okay, you take Iceman Utsi and you're like, okay, let's bring this person who lived in, 20,000 years ago, who maybe was like, I hope to see the afterlife one day. And then we resurrect him into this society that he has no context for. And honestly, I don't think he would share the memories. I don't think that's what's passed on. I think it would just be this kind of new, like a kid almost. Sort of like Poor Things.
The best movie, Emma Stone won it. Is the Golden Globes the Oscars? Are they the same? Okay, they're different. Okay, well, she won a Golden Globe.
She did?
Yeah, she did.
Oh, yay, good. I'm glad she won something for that, because she did so good.
She was so amazing. I hope she wins an Oscar.
I know that she's like a world famous actress that everyone has like beloved, been, adored her for years, and I'm getting late on the train. Me but I too. Am on the train now, and I'm like, she is so good.
I just didn't like La La Land. It wasn't really for me.
Yeah, and same with like, I've just never seen a movie that I really liked with her in it, and I'm not like a huge film buff, so.
Yeah, me neither.
But everything I've seen recently from her on The Curse with Nathan Fielder.
Oh my god. Oh,
Nathan Fielder.
Are you caught up on that?
Yeah. What were we talking about before Emma Stone?
Kids. I suppose to round up my thoughts on that. Well, I'm only 31, so I do feel like fairly confident that I don't want kids. Like, I'd say I'm like 90+%. And I've even when I was talking about when I was younger, did I even finish that point? I don't know. But I've never been someone that's been like dying to have kids. But I think we all sort of can understand the appeal of like making a mini version of you, especially with someone you love. Like, there are, again, there are things about that sound really cool. Yeah,
there's a lot of parents out there who love the idea of a miniature them, but hate it when that miniature them lives their unlived lives, or, reacts in a way or reveals their shadow side in the mirror.
I really do think a lot of people, because I've always just been, I haven't been able to understand some people's like eagerness to have kids. Like, even, I don't know, I just have always felt like even as a child, like why wouldn't you kind of try and wait as long as possible, because like once you have them, you have them. But I do think a lot of people surely subconsciously like bring kids in the world as a way to sort of almost like reckon with their own child wounds. That's my controversial opinion.
Totally. They're like, I want to be a better parent than my parents. I think every parent wants that.
Which is kind of beautiful, and that's evolution in action, so like go them.
Yeah.
But then I also just think it can be quite toxic. Because sometimes it feels like the people that are the least ready for children are the people that seem the most eager to have them really, really soon, which I've never understood. I also think people do have children to try and like fill a hole in their lives. We know that people will have children to try and like save their marriages, and like generally it's going to make a marriage harder. There are a lot of bad reasons to have children.
There are, yeah.
And I feel like there's almost no bad reason to choose not to have children. Like it's one of the, you don't need an excuse for not
bringing a new life into existence,
because that's the biggest outcome that could happen. So it feels like we should err on the side of like, not every reason for having children is particularly great, but any reason to not want them, fine by me.
Far from downplaying the sacredness of child raising and rearing, I think we don't take it seriously enough. I think it needs to be way more culturally sacred, as in like, let's make sure we're bringing kids into like an affirming, positive environment that can sustain them and support them healthily, so that they can contribute to the world and to the collective enriching of our society.
I know you like forced government classes generally aren't looked upon favorably in the US, but I do feel like there needs to be more education on the day-to-day of what is actually involved in having a kid. Like I do feel like so many people
have to shadow a mother.
Yeah, I think people have been blindsided a lot, and sort of I don't know, like they maybe weren't anticipating the behavioral issues a child might have, or how it's like they're not necessarily going to just like fall in line with you, and like the way that your parents did it is not necessarily going to work with these new beings that you've created.
The isolation of it, the need for mothers to have their own interests and outlets outside of mothering.
The way that women lose themselves, like it's so common for women to feel like, at least for the first couple, like it's a process to, after having kids, to like get back to sort of feeling like your own human again. But men don't have quite that same journey with it, especially because typically like men are continuing to go out to work and be out in the world, and with women it's a lot of the time like they're like holding themselves up inside for 2 years with a newborn. It'd just be really tough. Yeah.
I think it's safe to say, if anyone is inclined to have children, just make sure, at the very least, that you've like unpacked and processed your childhood and like seen the ways that your parents have influenced you, and like the particular wounds that have inherited from them that you may otherwise unconsciously be end up projecting onto your kids. Make sure that you know how to regulate your own nervous system.
That's such a big one.
Because most people don't. We don't receive a very good collective education about this. Certainly not in churches. Certainly not in most schools. Thankfully, like my high school had a lot of like hippie people who were like, we're going to learn how to meditate and do yoga today. And
so good.
And that definitely got me turned onto that earlier on in life, which I'm grateful for. But like being able to sit with our feelings, to dialogue out our own feelings through journaling, to understand and express your own needs and desires, so that you can communicate them in what will certainly be tense moments, how to set boundaries for yourself, how to have healthy differentiation between self and other, because so many parents like put their shit onto their kids. Yes. And take things really personally, and it's like the child is acting developmentally appropriately for their age. Something I'm so passionate about is what you said about you need to learn how to regulate your own nervous system before you have kids. Because, I mean, a big part of my childhood, and I've just seen it throughout my life in almost every setting imaginable, like a child is, having intense emotions, which children are supposed to have tantrums. I mean, that's developmentally appropriate when you haven't yet learned how to
regulate our emotions, which you can't expect a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old to, that it's like a lifelong journey. We're all still learning. But like, it's just constant where you see parents punishing their children
for being
unable to regulate their emotions. But it's like, I've even like seen examples of it in Target, and I don't want to like downplay the fact that like being a parent is very stressful, and I'm sure like everyone snaps.
This
and,
is
like,
why we don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's because we understand how sacred it is that we don't want to do it, and because if I was going to do it, I would want to be so all in, and I just can't do that.
I'd be the snapping person. That's the thing. I would snap under the pressure of parenthood.
I don't know. You are good at not snapping, I think.
Oh. But imagine being. But
it's good self-awareness, yeah. But anyway, parents punishing their children for not being able to regulate their emotions when they themselves cannot regulate the emotions. The amount of times I would get in trouble as a kid for just having big emotions, but my parents like were way more emotional, or like they were on par with how emotional I was, and they're the ones that were supposed to teach me that skill. And in their defense, like no one taught them, so this is all like judgment-free zone. Oh, my mum recently realized that little boy at the table wasn't naughty because of her unconscious bias training at work. She was like, I just realized he was having emotions,
unconscious
and I'm like,
bias
that would have been so
work.
good in my childhood. Yeah. Not the like UK government's unconscious bias training helping my boomer mother.
This is what socialists want. They want our parents to be healing themselves and recognizing that children aren't inherently
like,
naughty.
Kids have emotions.
What?
Yeah. Just the number of children that are treated like they're bad for, again, completely normal, developmentally appropriate emotions makes me really sad. Regardless of whether we have children or not, that we should just all be learning how to regulate our emotions, because otherwise we put it on other people, and that has a knock-on effect, and it makes our society worse. Children or not. We're still like all responsible for like the society we're creating for the children that are coming into the world. So we're all mothers and fathers in that sense.
We are. I identify as a mother, so
just as much as the mother who's working round the clock.
So suck my teat, haters. Delicious milk.
I only breastfeed.
So we hope you consider yourselves breastfeeding from this from this discussion today.
Yeah. Do we wrap it up there?
Yeah, I think so.
It will be interesting to like continue having discussions in the comments, because I feel like this is a very broad topic that everyone has a lot of opinions on. We've all had different experiences of being parented, which is like obviously influencing.
We're all just parenting each other home.
We are.
But first and foremost, ourselves. I'm learning how to parent myself for real. Like I do the little dialogues where I'm like, hey buddy.
Yeah, me too.
What's going on? All right, thanks for joining. Love you.
Yeah, we're going to go read Tennessee's Among the Nephites.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Who would read children's literature? If we were busy with children, we wouldn't have the time.
Honestly, we say we've been parenting them, but they've been parenting us. They've been giving us our allowances, our daily bread, so that we can read our little children's books.
Yeah, if you want to support the channel but you don't want to join our Patreon, we have PayPal, we have Venmo. If you just want to send us a little tip, we are all for honouring your dislike of commitment on this channel. So
to all who support us, thank you so much, Mommy and Daddy.
Thank you.
We couldn't do our little skits without you. Okay, love you. Bye.
Love you, bye.